Hi everyone, it's Don and I hope you're having a fantastic day. Well, in honor of Remembrance Day, I'd like to talk about one of the ships that, a cruise ship that actually made a huge contribution to the freedoms we enjoy today. Back in 1938, the cruise ship RMS Queen Elizabeth was launched with the Queen and the Princess. The King at the time wasn't there because there was other pressing matters going on in Europe and he had to be around Parliament. But this ship was launched as being one of the, at the time, the largest cruise ship in the world. And when she was first being ready to get launched back in 1938, things seemed to be getting a little calmer in Europe, and they thought, well, great, this ship is going to be able to start off. She was being built to be a true passenger liner for the Atlantic. She was going to join her sister ship, the Queen Mary. They're not identical, of course, but the two ships were going to do transatlantic crossings between Southampton and New York City. One would leave and the other would leave at the same time. They'd pass each other, and they would have the two largest vessels in the world at the time, luxury liners, being able to carry thousands and thousands of passengers across the ocean, and very, very quickly, because they at the time were some of the fastest ships afloat, able to go over 30 knots. In fact, you'll hear a little bit more about that story as we continue. So the ship was launched, and as she was being fitted, things started going worse and worse. So they stopped fitting the ship out as a passenger liner and started fitting her out as a troop transport. When it appeared that Britain and the rest of the world was going to end up in turmoil, they started stripping out all of her luxury, all of the fine, chandeliers and the fine dining, and opening the spaces below deck, not staterooms anymore. There'd be wide open spaces so they can carry more and more passengers as troops. And so when she actually got ready to sail back in 1940, she was painted out completely gray, not the beautiful, when you see a Cunard ship, there's that black and red outline of a Cunard ship, and it's a very luxurious look, very classic look. Well, when she launched, Queen Elizabeth looked in a completely gray, looks completely different than she would now. Now, here's the trouble with everything breaking out in Europe and Britain at conflict with Germany, what to do with the largest cruise ship in the world, because she's very vulnerable. They were very, they were within reach of enemy bombers at the time, and they just, of course, it would be a beautiful luxury target to get hit. And that wouldn't be the only thing. If they set her out to the open sea, of course, you had the U-boat threat back then, and that would be a prize that the German U-boats would be on the lookout for. That would be a huge, article and a huge write-up, and the captain would be celebrated as sinking the largest ship in the world. So they had to figure out what to do with the Queen Elizabeth. So a bunch of crew members, a very small skeleton crew, reported out to the Queen Elizabeth, and they were told to pack a very small overnight bag as they are just heading down to Southampton for some refits and some provisions. And so they let this go on and on for about a week. They were saying that, this is what they're getting ready to do. So if any enemy spies out there at the time would pick up on this, they would be alerted back in Germany to watch for this ship sailing to Southampton. So the Luftwaffe would have been ready, the U-boats would have been ready, they're on the lookout, and the captain set sail. In fact, it set sail, it still had some of its moorings from the launch dragging behind it in the water, kind of like the ropes. That's how unset and unfinished this ship was. The captain got a few miles out to sea and opened up his sealed orders. And lo and behold, it said, "You're not going to Southampton." It said, "Make speed for New York City." So the captain cranked up those engines and made a mad dash across the Atlantic to New York City. Nobody knew this was happening. The crew on board didn't know this was happening. Apparently the enemy didn't know this was happening. And even those in New York, very few people knew this was showing up. And all of a sudden, one gray morning, through the fog, comes the largest cruise ship in the world into New York Harbor. After making what apparently was a transatlantic speed record across the ocean. Of course, the ship was locked into secrecy and locked into, you weren't allowed to talk about it. The captain wasn't allowed to talk about how fast the ship got across the ocean. But it's widely suspected that, people figured it out. It left on this day and it got here at this time. It broke the record. But it officially was not allowed to say anything because of the war. Now, at the time, it pulled into New York Harbor, and it pulled in beside the Queen Mary and the Normandy. So at the time in New York Harbor, we now had the 3 largest cruise ships in the world in our harbor side by side. We had the Normandy, we had the Queen Mary, and we had the Queen Elizabeth. But of course, the US at that time was not in the war yet. But they re-provisioned the ship, they outfitted her, they completed her off to make sure that she's ready to be a troop transport. And off went the Queen Mary and the Queen Elizabeth, not to Europe, not in the United States, but off to Australia. And that's where they started their wartime service. The United States wasn't in the war yet, so they couldn't be involved. So they were issuing, ferrying soldiers back and forth from Australia to different areas in New Guinea and places like that. But then United States joined the war. And quickly, the Queen Mary and the Queen Elizabeth were brought back and started doing transatlantic crossings between the United States and Britain. And these ships were so large at the time that they were carrying almost double what a normal troop transport would carry. At one point, they averaged over 15,000 passengers set sailing across the Atlantic, and in quick progression. They were getting across in 5 days, which was phenomenal speed back then. Now, can you imagine? These ships are built for around 2,000 people, maybe 800 crew, so say 3,000 passengers, and they have 15,000 passengers alone besides the crew. They had to designate the troops into certain areas, and they were not allowed to move from those quadrants on the ship. Because as you can imagine, the ships aren't quite as big as they are now and as stable as they are now. If you put a whole bunch of troops too much on one side, those ships would just list straight over to the side, especially when they're overcrowded to that point. And one sailor sending across noted that no troop on these ships ever was able to sleep in a cold bed, because the beds were being rotated over and over again. So as soon as somebody would step off a cot, you would climb into it. So it would always be warm. But can you just imagine the logistics of being on a 15,000 troop transport for 6 days, 5 days, and you have, you're basically scrunched in like this. Getting food to everybody. Let's not even go where the bathroom would be, and seasickness and things like that. It would definitely not be the luxury cruise that a lot of people were thinking this ship would start off with. Now, they continued to do this service till the end of the war, including taking part in D-Day. And it's actually amazing to think that, Winston Churchill himself said that these two ships, the Queen Mary and the Queen Elizabeth, were so instrumental during the war that they probably shortened the war by themselves because of the speed and the amount of troops they were able to carry by a year, a full year. That's how instrumental these ships were. They even called them at one point heroes of Britain, and they were honored like veteran soldiers and heroes of the war for their service. Shortly after the war, the Queen Elizabeth was finally able to do what she was built to do, and they set sail from Southampton to New York on luxury cruises once again. And that first cruise was just filled with every star and every famous person you could think of, as they were celebrating luxury. And the ship was outfitted in luxury. At the time, she was the most luxurious cruise ship ever built. The fastest, the largest, and who knows, even a war hero. So yeah, cruise ships have been instrumental in doing a lot of things, not just sending people on vacation, but they actually helped shorten the war effort. Well, I hope you appreciate this little taste of history about the Queen Elizabeth, and I'd like to end this little short video not with my normal bluster, but just thanking everybody out there for their service. And I hope everyone out there remains safe. And if you wouldn't mind, I'm just going to put up a beautiful scene from one of my cruises and just have a moment of silence.